Utah is getting a lot of hype going into the 2019 season, but can they live up to it? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
Last year, Utah lost their star quarterback in Tyler Huntley and their star running back in Zack, but were still able to finish the season 9-5 with a berth in the Pac-12 title game. This year, they will be one of the most experienced teams in the entire Pac-12, and as I mentioned, are one of the nation's biggest surprise teams going into 2019, not just to capture their first ever Pac-12 title, but also as dark horse college football playoff contenders. And they certainly have the team to do it. Like I said, they returned 7 starters offensively, including Tyler Huntley at quarterback and Zack at running back. So the key in 2019 is to keep both of those guys healthy. And if Tyler Huntley can stay healthy, he will benefit from getting his top 5 wide receivers back, including Britton Covey and Jalen Dixon. Defensively, though, I think that's going to be even better than this Utah offense. And that would be expected with Kyle Whittingham as their head coach. They also returned 7 starters defensively from a unit that allowed just 19.4 points per game in 2018. That also includes just 100 rushing yards per game. So they're going to make a lot of their opponents try to win this game through the air, and they're going up against a capable quarterback in Zack at BYU in Week 1, who could very well beat Utah through the air to snap their 8-game losing streak to the Utes. Now, BYU is certainly due a win against Utah. Like I mentioned, they have lost 8 straight games to the Utes, and the past 4 games have been decided by an average of 5.5 points. This game opening up on a Thursday night at home for the Cougars. Everything's adding up for a victory for BYU. But Utah has so much hype going into the season. I truly believe that Utah is the better team. While BYU does return 9 starters offensively, well, they finally found themselves a quarterback in Zack, who was absolutely perfect in their bowl win over Western Michigan. I just don't think BYU has enough to beat Utah. I know they've come close the past couple of years, and I would expect a very, very close game in Week 1. But I think this Utah team, assuming they are fully healthy, which I think they will be, wins this game in a narrow one over the Cougars, and they extend their winning streak to 9 over BYU. They return home to face Northern Illinois, and you'll notice that we didn't have an automatic W there. And that's because Northern Illinois is not a team from the group of 5 that you can take for granted. You cannot underestimate the Huskies. Last year, Utah went on the road, took care of business against Northern Illinois, but only won 17-6. I expect the margin of victory to be bigger in 2019, but I didn't put an automatic W there just to show that this is a game that Utah cannot overlook by any means, especially coming off a very big-time victory over their rival in BYU. But I do think they beat the Huskies. They are 3-0 with a win over Idaho State, opening up Pac-12 play against USC on the road. And a fun fact is that the home team between Utah and USC has won 6 straight games. So USC winning 6 straight over the Utes when this game is played at the Coliseum. And I think it will be 7 straight when played at the Coliseum. Not only is the Coliseum a tough place to play, USC is going to take major strides forward in 2019. And they have to if Clay Helton wants to keep his job. He's on the hot seat this year after a 5-7 season last year, their first losing season since 2001. But JT Daniels comes in this year, and I expect him to take some major strides. Graham Harrell comes in as offensive coordinator. He's going to implement more of an air raid offense. USC returns some very, very talented wide receivers, all of which I would expect to do very well in the NFL. So I think Utah drops this game to the Trojans on the road. Coliseum, not an easy place to play. And the surprise team in the Pac-12, one of the biggest surprise teams in the nation, is 0-1 in conference play. But they are 3-1 overall. They come back home to face off against Washington State, and Utah has not had much luck against the Cougars in recent years, dropping the past 4 to the Cougars, including a 28-24 loss to them last year. But gone is Gardner Minshew for Washington State. He was nearly unstoppable last year in Mike Leach's offense. But Gage Gabrew does come in, another transfer quarterback, and that's what Mike Leach has thrived on lately. But with this game being back home, with this game coming off a loss, Kyle Whittingham's teams rarely have a bit of a hangover, rarely lose back-to-back games. And I think they bounce back, beat the Cougars, who I think will still be a tough opponent in the Pac-12, but not as good as they were last year. And Utah snaps that 4-game losing streak to Washington State and gets back in the win column to be 4-1 going in to their bye week. They go on the road to Oregon State. This is another team that they cannot afford to overlook. Oregon State has struggled in recent years. We know that. And now they're entering year 2 of the Jonathan Smith era. But they have a very talented offense. Jake Luton at quarterback, Jamar Jefferson at running back, and a very talented crew of wide receivers that certainly does not get enough attention. Also, they returned 9 starters defensively. So while Jonathan Smith's teams will be much more competitive in 2019, I just don't know if they're going to compete enough in the win column. They're going to see improvements there because of how difficult their schedule is. I think Utah, with that week of rest, comes on the road and beats Oregon State, but I think it will be closer than some people expect, and certainly than some people want. But they do come on the road, get a win over the Beavers, and they are now 5-1 going into a game against Arizona State. And if you want to talk about a revenge game, this is the one for you. Last year against the Sun Devils, that was the game that Utah lost their quarterback and Tyler Huntley. And then they ended up losing that game 38-20 to the Sun Devils. So this is a big-time revenge game for Utah and a big-time revenge game for Tyler Huntley. And I expect him to have a big day in this one against the Sun Devils, a team that I am high on in 2019. I expect to get back to a bowl game in year 2 under Herm Edwards. But with this game being back at Utah, with this defense playing the way they are, facing what will more likely be a freshman quarterback with the Sun Devils, I think Utah wins their second straight after the bye week and takes care of the Sun Devils here. They remain home to face off against California, and I think this game will be a low-scoring affair, mostly due in part to the strength of the California defense. This California secondary is one of the best in the entire nation. Justin Wilcox has kind of implemented his style already with the Golden Bears entering year 3. He was a defensive-minded coach. We knew that. He got them to a bowl game last year in year 2 and continues to build. Their schedule, though, and their offense is not good, though. Schedule extremely tough, offense going to struggle. So I think this game is going to go back and forth because I don't think California's offense has enough to score against the Utah defense, but I think the Utah offense will struggle against California's defense. In the end, though, this game is at home. And in the end, Utah's offense has enough talent to make the plays when they need it the most to get the win over the Golden Bears. This game, like Oregon State, will probably be fairly close, but Utah gets the win over California. Now they have won 4 in a row, going on the road to Washington. Now this is a game that could almost seem like a loss for the Utes, and a lot of people would write it off. Washington, one of the best teams in the Pac-12 North, going to go up against Oregon, and that game could very well decide who wins that division. Utah fell to Washington by 14 earlier in the 2018 season, and then again in the Pac-12 Championship game, losing just 10-3. And keep in mind, Utah was playing with Jason Shelley and Armand Shine, their backup quarterback and running back, and still gave the Huskies a fight. Last year's Washington team was better than the Washington team they will have this year. Yes, they bring in Jacob Eason. Yes, their wide receivers are phenomenal, but they only return 2 starters defensively. And even though Eason and those wide receivers are good, it is very tough to replace your all-time leading passer and your all-time leading rusher. Utah comes on the road and beat Washington. They are hungry for a win against the Huskies. They've lost to them twice last year. They are just 1-12 against the Huskies in the Pac-12, and they will get the win over Chris Peterson and his Huskies on the road. And by this point, with a 1-loss Utah team, you can certainly be talking about college football playoff. They're going off a bye week, entering the final stretch of the season against a fairly easy schedule, UCLA, Arizona, and Colorado. So not only are they looking at a Pac-12 championship, but they could be in the hunt for the college football playoff this late in the season. They come off that big-time bye week, facing off against UCLA, where Utah has beaten the Bruins the past 2 meetings by a combined score of 89-27. Now, UCLA is also coming off a bye week here, so I don't expect the margin of victory to be that huge. And keep in mind, UCLA returns 19 starters. So what Chip Kelly is doing with the Bruins is obviously working. You saw how competitive they were getting towards the end of last year. Won 3 games last year, but they were all in Pac-12 play. So they're going to be a dangerous team in 2019, at least giving some teams some scares, pulling off some upsets. Not on the road, though, against Utah. The Utes beat the Bruins, especially with that week of rest. They just have 2 games remaining, though, at Arizona and Colorado. This Arizona game, though, is one that legitimately scares me for the Utes. It is a big, big trap game for Utah. Late in the season, their sights are set on the Pac-12 title. Their sights are set on the playoff. The desert, not an easy place to play. And they will fall to Kevin Sumlin and Khalil Tate in Tucson. They will fall to the Wildcats. And hear me out here. Since 2015, Utah has lost at least one game that they were not supposed to lose. Not just a tiny little upset, but a pretty big upset. In 2015, they fell to USC as the number 3 team in the country by 18 points. In 2016, Utah was number 11 as 11-point favorites to Oregon, and they fell to the Ducks. In 2017, they lost as 10-point favorites to Arizona State by 20 points. And last year, Utah was number 16, and they fell on the road to Arizona State. And I know they lost Tyler Huntley in that game, but they still fell by 18 points to the Sun Devils. So every year there was at least one game that Utah fails to show up in, and usually they are decent favorites. I think it's this game late in the season against Arizona, a team that will greatly improve in year 2 under Kevin Sumlin. J.J. Taylor at running back, Khalil Tate, assuming he can stay healthy at quarterback, and a defense for Arizona that returns 8 starters, and I expect to continue to get better and better week in and week out over the course of the 2019 season. Utah falls on the road to Arizona in a major trap game, but comes back home, finishes the year with a win over Colorado, a team that will be led by Mel Tucker, a brand new head coach. I like their offense for the Buffaloes, but the defense will struggle. And this is where I think on the final game of the season, senior night for these seniors and Zack Moss and Tyler Huntley, guys like that, they show up, they show out, and close out their careers in Utah with a win. And that gives Utah a 10-2 record in 2019. And that is absolutely nothing to be upset about whatsoever for the Utes. That could be good enough to get them a berth in the Pac-12 title game. Could be good, and then once you get there, they could win the Pac-12 and very well earn themselves a spot in the Rose Bowl. When you look at this schedule, people may argue you could alternate some losses here. You could see them losing to BYU, maybe beating USC or Arizona. I think a lot of people will not like this Arizona loss, but when you heard what I said about those games that they tend to lose, this truly does make sense, and this is a type of game that I could see Kevin Sumlin really pulling out of his hat and pulling off a win here. But Utah finishing 10-2, a major surprise team in the entire country this season. By that point, if they can pull off that win over Arizona, can absolutely be considered college football playoff contenders. So I can't wait to see what Kyle Whittingham and the Utes can do in 2019, assuming they can certainly stay healthy. So guys, as always, thank you for watching. Please go check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert. And of course, go check out our official website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for our newsletter and especially sign up for our expert picks. For just $30, you will get every single one of our 2019 college football spread picks, including the postseason. So I can promise you that is a deal and an opportunity you do not want to pass up. So go join our team and sign up today only at thegridironexpert.com. And guys, as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.